Hi, my name is Frank Saponczyk, and I'm a member of the Skoda Minotti's Valuation and Litigation Advisory Services Group. Today we're going to talk a little bit about fraud and embezzlement and what the steps are that corporations can take to minimize the likelihood of them being a victim of fraud and embezzlement. Frequently I'm asked, Frank, as a corporation, what can we do to minimize our risk? Good question. Lots of things. Simple things. Some are really cost effective. Let's review some of them. First off, evaluate your internal controls. Assess your risks. Test the internal controls. Have your outside CPAs conduct a surprise audit, specially designed for fraud and embezzlement. You also want to consider establishing a fraud hotline, an inexpensive way to allow your employees to communicate to an independent party whether or not fraud is occurring. You want to rotate your jobs. You want to establish a whistleblower program. You want to have an anti-fraud policy, and we'll talk about that in a minute. In addition, it's not a bad thing to educate your employees on fraud and embezzlement, because many quite don't know exactly what fraud and embezzlement is. A common question is, what is a fraud policy? A fraud policy is a document that is signed on an annual basis by your employees. It gives the employee and the employer an opportunity to sit down, discuss fraud, establish the tone, communicate to the employee the tone at the top that you want to communicate that fraud will not be tolerated in our company. The employee would sign that document acknowledging that they have not perpetrated a fraud, and it also allows them the opportunity to communicate to the company at that point in time as to whether or not they're aware of any fraud that may be existing. That fraud policy will discuss what is inappropriate, what is fraud, what is embezzlement. It's not borrowing, it's stealing. And you have to approach it in such simplistic terms so that you don't allow people out at a later date that they didn't know that it was covered in a fraud policy. You want to establish reporting procedures. If they are aware of fraud and embezzlement, who are they going to turn to? Where are they going to report? You'd want to make that be an independent individual outside of the corporation, whether it's outside CPAs, which we do for some of our clients, outside law firms, or an organization such as the American Institute of Certified Fraud Examiners. But you have to establish a hotline. They're inexpensive. It's money well spent. And many companies we're seeing these days establish whistleblower programs where they actually incentivize employees for tipping off the company or an outside agency that something funny may be going on. And that something funny could cost companies hundreds of thousands of dollars. A lot of companies don't like to deal in the area of rumors, but we found that tips are probably the #1 source of corporations determining and establishing that fraud is existing. If there is anything that we can do in the future, please give us a call. But these are several steps that you can take to minimize your corporation being a victim of fraud and embezzlement.